Daniel, thank you for that live report. The Springfield Police Board of Commissioners now handles issues such as disciplinary action within the force. Earlier this afternoon, they met to discuss any updates. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson now joins us live in Springfield with the latest details on that. Maria?
Chris, the Springfield Board of Police Commissioners kept today's meeting brief before they quickly went into executive session, but we did hear a short message from the department's superintendent.
You only have 2 cases, I believe, that you have not reviewed previously that are being currently investigated by IIU. I would expect those cases to be done probably within the next week or 2. And then you have the hearings still pending that were in front of you before. I believe you're waiting for criminal trials.
She adds there is only one ongoing internal complaint that is almost complete. The Springfield Board of Police Commissioners was created last year after the state Supreme Judicial Court sided with the City Council's effort to replace the position of the police commissioner with a Board of Commissioners. Also discussed at today's meeting, the Board of Police Commissioners manual is very close to having a working draft completed, at which point the Department of Justice will look for input from the commissioners. And after that, the manual is expected to be discussed at a future open meeting. And starting at 6:30 tonight, the public is invited to the Raymond Jordan Senior Center in Springfield, where the department will discuss ongoing reform policies as well as their transparency when it comes to disciplinary actions. Reporting live in Springfield, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.